All right, ladies, this is Alex from mindfulattraction.org. And no, 2.0. And today we're going to talk about 3 mentalities to improve relationships with men. And this one is about it's pretty much how to develop the mentality that will enable you to attract better relationships. Now, mind you, the reason why mentality is important is because it's your mind that changes perception, and it's your perception that changes your reaction to events, and those reactions, it's what creates your personality. It's what you remember and how you begin to see yourself as. You see, so one of the things is that by simply changing your mentality and changing the way you perceive things, it's going to automatically change the way you behave, which will inevitably change the kind of results you have. And a lot of the times it's not even something complicated, but more of just a simple shift in the way you see things that will literally make a difference. Now the problem is that most people's mentalities are not preemptively made proactively, but rather they're more reactive. They really didn't have a choice. A lot of them, some people, like, because if you're a kid and you're raised in an extremely toxic household, it's going to take some enlightened Buddha like kid to be able to overcome that, and a lot of people don't. But the the good things that we have is all right. So anyways, let's get started. Fucking talking too much right now. So the first thing is have a long-term vision, because most people's ideal goal for relationships is very short-term. It's very in the moment. It's by short term, I mean, is more based on satisfying the current needs. You might be feeling needy, you might be feeling unhappy. So as a result, rather than thinking about the kind of relationship you want that's specific and based on a relationship that's healthy, you're gonna say, you know what, I'll take whatever I want right now, just because I need it right now. I need something right now. It's kind of like going out. It's kind of like being hungry, going out late, not finding a lot to eat. So you'll take anything that comes to you. You see. So that's one of the big problems, is that they have a very vague goal about their own relationships that's not even based on reality. That's based on the fantasy. The problem is that when you have a fantasy, it doesn't matter what you do, it's not going to happen no matter how much you try. You see? So in addition to that, a lot of people's vision for relationships, it's a relationship where how can I say this? A relationship where they're happy, but they're not specific enough to find out what are you feeling there. You see, because a lot of the times, if you just want a specific kind of relationship, you're gonna get it, but it may be superficial to the point that you weren't proactively enough to write out in detail how you want to feel. Because when you have that specific long-term vision for a relationship, what's going to happen is that you're going to avoid a lot of those relationships that are toxic to you. For example, if you just say, I want a relationship with a guy that has a house and all that sort of stuff. Okay, fine. But then how do you feel? Are you happy in it? I mean, how's the relationship? Are you the one that's needy? Is he the one that's needy? Are you both happy? Are you both self-sustaining? Are you both like having unhealthy attachment to each other? That forces you to be specific, because what's going to happen is then you're going to notice the qualities in you that will hinder you from making that happen. Because a lot of the times it's not even about the person, it's about you, because you're the one who makes a choice. You're the one that's picking the people, So by being specific about how you want not just the relationship to look, but the dynamics, the inner dynamics, how you going to feel. How are you going to feel? What are you going to accept? What are you not going to accept? By having those specific barriers, saying, you know what, I'll accept this, but I won't accept this. And sticking to them. What's going to happen is that when the moment comes and you feel bad and then something bad happens, if you weren't aware of that specific boundary that you should not cross in relationship, or else you're going to dump them, you're going to make a decision based on reaction. You're going to say, you know what, fuck that shit. I'll take them. I don't care. I need to be happy. But now, since you know what, I promised myself I would never get into this kind of relationship, and you kind of know, like, logically, you're going to make a better decision based on that. You're going to have more information. The problem is that when you are in those situations, emotions causes people to make bad decisions. Make your enemy emotional, and they usually make hasty decisions. Most people don't think long term and specifically. So what tends to happen is that because you are not aware of what you want, rather than losing out, No, rather than gaining, you're gonna feel like you're losing out. But because you know exactly what you want, what's gonna happen is that you're gonna notice what you prevented. You're gonna say, you know what? I know if I get with this guy because I see these qualities, specific qualities that I know is gonna make me unhappy. No matter what happens, I'm gonna be unhappy. But most people are not specific enough. They don't know what makes them happy. They don't know what makes them unhappy. They really don't know, because they're so wrapped up in their own fantasy that they fail to see that their fantasy for a relationship a lot of the time is unrealistic. It isn't. But anyways, all right, keep going. So the second one is have a wider perspective. This is a big one. You got to be able to look beyond your own needs, wants, and fears. That includes culturally speaking. For the most part, we usually have our own desires for relationships, our own fears. And a lot of the times, those fears paint other people as threats when otherwise they're not really threats. Fear usually enhances the enemy and reduces your ability to defend yourself. It makes people paranoid. If you notice, a lot of people who go crazy is usually because of fear of something. Now, we usually have fear because we need it in the wild. Like I said earlier, we need fear because fear is what gives us the adrenaline rush that when we see the threat that we were anticipating, it gives us the energy to run away. The problem is that mechanism is not really needed much in these kind of days. And also the problem is that if you continue to be in a state of fear, it kind of jades you, it hinges you, it really fucks up your neurochemistry. But that's how most people live. They live in fear, underlying fear, not direct, but more of a more complex manifestation of fear. That when you're looking at it from the outside, you say, "Oh, she's just being needy," or he's just an outgoing person. But in reality, if you look deep down, they fear not getting attention. They fear being noticed. They fear this or that. Usually, fear runs the world, unfortunately. But that's a problem. Is that when you go into relationships with your own fears, with a lot of strong emotions. For example, when you notice yourself getting emotional about things, like for example, if you notice yourself getting defensive, I'm gonna talk about that later on, but like any emotions that's predicated on fear or how people are going to perceive you, it makes you biased towards the other person. So you won't be able to think with empathy. You're not going to be able to understand the other person. That's what I mean by widening your perspective. And that's looking outside your own fears, your own needs, and being able to understand the other person. Because a lot of the times, we're wrong. But most of the time, we think we're right. You know what I'm saying? And for the most part, the reason why we feel that is not because of the facts themselves, but because the emotions paints the facts. The emotions is what interprets the facts. So it doesn't matter what tends to happen. If you have a certain emotion, your emotions is only going to let you interpret whatever reflects the vibrational frequency of that emotion, if that even makes any sense. So that causes people to not have empathy, to not understand their partner, because they're all wrapped up in their own fear. And usually you think you're angry at them, but in reality you're just unhappy. You think that they're making you mad, but in reality you're just finding an excuse to lash out whatever's inside of you, and you're redirecting that anger towards somebody else. Now, it's funny how the brain works is that the brain will convince you that you're happy, but the reason why you're unhappy is because of the other person. But in reality, everything that's being created is being self-created, because everything's going on inside of you. Oh, this whole thing you call a reality is going on inside of you. So you are self-generating everything. That the problem is that your system is fucked up. Your system is made to generate an environment that's not really here anymore, which is constant threat. There's no saber-toothed tiger here to kill us. But the problem is that mechanism thinks it still needs to do that shit. It's not adapted to the times. So it's going to continually look for reasons to be unhappy. And so the problem, though, is that the ego doesn't allow itself to see itself that way and blame itself for its own problem, because that means then you're going to have to work on it. So what does it do? It redirects it. You have a long day from work. You're stressed out. You go home. There's a mess. You get angry at the kids, right? But let's say you came home and you had a good day. You get it home. It's a mess. You're chilling. You'll fix it. You see what I'm saying? It's all just self-generated by the emotions that you feel. So a lot of the times, the enemy is not the situation. The enemy is your emotions, the way you perceive things. And that's why you got to go at the heart of the problem. But most people don't do that because they're so focused that they're right. They're so enthralled by their own opinions that they can't see beyond themselves. And that's when you are emotional. That's when you get emotional and you make bad decisions. And a lot of times, those emotions linger on. into the next relationships. And the thing is that those emotions keep generating the same results. And the problem is that the more you try to satisfy those emotions, the more they're going to proliferate. That's why you got to use that's why you got to use mindfulness in order to solve that. But anyways, yeah, I'm talking a lot. But all right, the third thing is watch out for defensiveness and the need to be right. That's the third part of having a healthy relationship. It's pretty much what I like to do is anytime you notice yourself being defensive, you feel that urge, like, oh fuck, no, fuck that, I'm right, or fuck that, I hate when people think this. Like, anytime you say I hate when people think this, I hate when people think that, any annoyance is a sign of defensiveness. So if you just become aware of the moments where you are defensive, like just feeling defensive in any sense of the way, or watching the television channel and you watch something that you don't like, you feel that surge of emotions, like, oh fuck that shit. Or like you see you watch you're talking to someone, somebody blames you for doing something, you feel that defensiveness, you observe it. Why? Because if you allow that emotion to, if you feel the emotion then act, what's going to happen is that emotion is going to act through you, and it's going to change the way you perceive the events. It's going to give you a false representation of reality. You're going to see the world through a squinted gaze, through fog of emotions. You're not going to see reality. And so that's going to give you a biased perspective. People are going to feel they have a biased perspective. And people, as a result, are not going to respect your opinions. Because when somebody knows that you have a biased opinion, or that you always think that way, they're not going to fucking listen to you. They listen to people who are unbiased. And let me tell you something, being unbiased is something that cannot be faked. You could tell when someone's unbiased. You just cannot fake that. Because the stuff is always coming through. Your opinions are always coming through. People are not stupid. They'll see through your contradictions. But noticing the times when you are defensiveness and just noticing it is going to put you a step ahead of most people. Because most people are not even aware of the defensiveness because they always think they're right. But when you become aware of your defensiveness, it causes you to always ask yourself, maybe I'm wrong. Now, you may not be wrong, but the simple fact that you are open enough to ask that is enough. Enough for people to respect your opinion, because they can sense that you understand their perspective. A lot of times people just don't want to be right. People just want to be understood. And you will never understand people when you are defensive. And people will never feel understood when they feel that you're being defensive. You could feel someone's defensiveness from a mile away. You really could. It's called passive aggression. But yeah, and that's a lot of times that's what causes people to always attract bad relationships, or not because you can't get them, but because you keep losing on the good ones, because you keep self-sabotaging yourself because of that emotion. And what tends to happen is that it's not that the relationship fucks you up, but more is that the emotion itself scars you. It's a lot. It's a lot on the human brain, especially when you derive your sense of self based on relationships, right? And when you're not successful at it, and you see other people being successful because they take that picture on Facebook, you feel inadequate, and that continues the pattern, and that causes you to feel even more inadequate, which will inevitably recreate those events that feeds that emotion, right? And that pretty much goes down to changing the self-image and changing the way you perceive yourself. And if you want a book on that, the book Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz talks about that, on how to change your self-image by changing the servo mechanism. And The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle is also good on that. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Anyways, take care. Bye-bye. Hey man, no, bye-bye. I gotta turn this off.